So I'm pretty sure by now most people who have been on YouTube or who have played video games in the past 5 or 6 years know what Five Nights at Freddy's is. It's a point-and-click horror game that was developed by one guy in his basement in Texas that is now a multi-million-dollar property that has a game on the PlayStation now, which wouldn't sound so crazy if it hadn't gotten this popular in almost less than half a decade. And the thing is, most of the games are really good. The first and second one are like masterpieces. The third one, a lot of people hated, but I still think there's some charm to it. The fourth one is perfect. The fifth one was a step away from the regular formula, but I feel like that was a really good step in Scott Cawthon's part, because people were getting tired of the same old formula of closing doors and checking cameras and stuff like that. So I feel like the fifth game really spiced that up and gave the players something new to look forward to. And the sixth game was weird because nobody really expected the sixth game. They didn't know there would be a sixth game. So when it dropped, everybody just thought it was a troll by Scott, because that's what Scott is famous for, is trolling people. Because he did it with a game that he made before called Sit and Survive, where he released Five Nights at Freddy's 3, but he said he released Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and he released Sit and Survive, and the kid in the game just had a Freddy mask on, so he's done a lot of other stuff to mess with people, but I can't really remember any of those, so I can't really give examples. But Five Nights at Freddy's 6 was a game where there were day and night phases. During the day, you could basically make your own pizzeria. You could buy prizes and attractions, you could buy robots, you could customize the size. But the thing is, there were lots of secrets hidden in the day shift. Like, for some of the mini games, there would be stories you could learn, there would be like images you could see. There's just a lot of important stuff for the story. Some of the mini games even had secret exits and entrances and stuff like that you could get to. But basically, the newer games have been dropping off a lot. Like, Ultimate Custom Night is a good game. It's just not supposed to be a scary game. It's supposed to be like a love letter to Five Nights at Freddy's, because first of all, it's really hard to beat like the maximum difficulty in that game. I think there's only like 1,000 or so people in the entire world who've actually done it. But it is pretty funny, I'll admit that. It's not like completely fall off your chair rolling on the floor laughing hilarious, but like, it's funny. But the VR game, I actually really like the VR game. Even though I played it on the flat mode on the PlayStation 4, I still really like that game. And I think it's good in its own right. But Security Breach is not that good. At launch, there were a lot of bugs. The characters aren't scary. The jump scares aren't scary. The environment is impressive and it looks good, yes, but for something like a horror game, that shouldn't be prioritized. For a horror game, you should prioritize making the characters scary, making the gameplay tense, and just trying to make a scary game. I feel like for Security Breach, all they tried to do was they tried to service the fans more than they tried to make a good game. And so that made the game more rushed and overall just made a really rushed, crappy game. But I sure hope that they fix it when the next DLC comes out. But with all that out of the way, we're going to be talking about what made the old Five Nights at Freddy's games and just old Five Nights at Freddy's in general scary. So, in 2014, the first Five Nights at Freddy's game came out, and it was released on, actually, I can't remember what it was released on. I'm pretty sure it might have been released on Game Jolt, if that's what it was. But anyways, Scott had made it as part of a group of games that he was making. Not a group of games like related to each other, but just he made a lot of games back in the day because he was really struggling to make money, because he was a game developer, but that was like really one of the only trades that he knew was to develop games. So when he came up with the idea for Five Nights at Freddy's, it was actually from criticisms over his older games on how the characters look creepy and off. So he took those criticisms and designed a lot of these characters and this environment. this gameplay system, and that's basically what created Five Nights at Freddy's. And it was a really scary game. People on YouTube started playing it, so it started blowing up, and everybody was excited and hyped about the game. Everybody wanted to play it, everybody wanted to watch people play it. But when Scott decided to make a second game, since the first game was so popular, he tried his hardest to make it as good as he could. Like, I think there's 10 characters in that game to go against. There's no doors, and everything works a little bit differently from the first game, and it is a masterpiece. The second Five Nights at Freddy's game is one of the greatest horror games ever made. And yes, you can argue against that and say that there might be better games than Five Nights at Freddy's 2, but I still think it is one of the best horror games of all time. The designs of the characters are scary, the designs of the environments and the cameras are scary. Just basically everything about it just gives off this really creepy vibe. But the thing that makes old Five Nights at Freddy's so good is just the unknown about it, because when the first two games released, there wasn't a lot known. There wasn't, like, nobody knew who the purple guy was. Nobody knew why the purple guy was doing this stuff. Nobody really even knew what the purple guy was doing. They just knew that it's killing people. And people were just kind of, it was just kind of weird back then, because there wasn't really a good, there really wasn't anybody explaining what the story was happening, or what was going on with the story, because everybody just had to draw their own conclusions and figure out what was happening for themselves. And I think that's what made it so fun, was to play the game back and over again and see if there was anything that they had missed, to see if there was something that they could put together and put the pieces of the puzzles together and see if they could solve the mystery of Five Nights at Freddy's. And I feel like that's what kept people going and what hyped people up for the next game was the story, because every game knew parts that the story would get released, more details would come out, and people would have more to go off of, and they would have it. It would just be easier for people to figure out the story and find out what it was that was going on. But the thing is, after people were starting to finish the story and trying to solve it, things just went off the deep end, because the games were good and all that in, let's say, 2016, when things started to fall off. Five Nights at Freddy's 6 was released in, I think, 2017 or 18. I think it was late 2017. But the thing is, after all this, people have basically solved the story. There was nothing else to look forward to. And that's what makes old Five Nights at Freddy's so special, is because if you look back at the first two Five Nights at Freddy's games and you remember what went on during those games, it was the main point, and the reason why the first two games were so special is because nobody really knew anything about the story. And that's what engaged them into playing the games, was because they were scary, they were fun, and the story and all that in the games is what kept people coming back to it. But the thing is, the new games have just started dying off because there's not as much effort being put into them. They're still good games in their own rights. They're just not as charming and as special as the old ones were. And I feel like that's what separates the first two from the rest. So this is one of the very first videos I'm going to post on this channel. I have another one posted, but it was more for recording videos, for clips, for something I was going to do. But if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel, and I'll be making a lot more videos. I'll be making a lot more, not documentaries, but kind of like videos like this, just commentaries on stuff like that. And if you want to see more of that, then I will be making more videos like this. But if you will, subscribe, like the video, make sure it gets shared. That's about it.